So my first ever experience of lifting weights was in my garage as a child, and that was quickly followed by me following my mom's Jane Fonda videos, and thus we have the spectrum of fitness for women. My name is Annie Miller, Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist, and I help you learn as you train and enjoy your lifts again. Today, let's go ahead and look at what needs to happen for women to build muscle, and does lifting heavy need to be a part of that equation? Fitness for women is marketed across a large spectrum, as I mentioned, but it mostly falls between getting toned and using 5-pound pink dumbbells, or being a completely yoked CrossFit woman or competitive bodybuilder who trains multiple times per day and probably has to eat more than you can imagine in order to keep that physique. But somehow those ultra-muscular physiques are lumped into what you'll look like if you moderately lift weights. So you're left with the question that I assume is, how can I build a physique that looks like I train while maybe not completely being jacked out of my mind? Though if you want to be jacked AF, that's game two, no shame. I could be wrong there, but this video is answering the question, do you have to lift heavy to gain muscle, particularly as a female? We are going to focus on those who want to build muscle, which I assume is from an aesthetic and physique standpoint. Maybe you don't enjoy lifting heavy, or maybe you're afraid of it, or you just have no interest in lifting what you currently perceive to be as heavy. I have to start off by saying that the appearance of having what I think most people would refer to as toned requires a low body fat percentage. Yes, we have to build a muscular physique underneath, but being able to see that muscle then comes down to removing that adipose tissue between the skin layers and the muscle. So just know that before we move forward. In terms of lifting heavy, you have to understand that heavy is relative. To a brand new lifter, bench pressing an empty barbell could be heavy. That is the rate of perceived exertion for that athlete, while 135 pounds, which is a 45-pound bar with two 45-pound plates on each side, could be an RPE of 8 for a more well-trained athlete. My point is that lifting heavy doesn't automatically mean a certain measurement of weight. What you perceive to be heavy will change over time based on your seasons of life and training. Now we turn to science to let us know if we need to lift heavy as women in order to build muscle. My immediate answer is you will likely have to, at some point, lift challenging loads. So if that's a yes, then you can call it a yes. You're certainly not going to maximize hypertrophy by lifting loads that are not challenging for you. I do think we should also specify that perhaps people asking this question about heavy lifting might also be thinking of extremely low training volume and very high loads, something like near maximal strength. And I do not think that that is needed in order to build muscle. That's needed in order to build absolute strength. So heavy is not always synonymous with a 1 rep max or a 3 rep max in training. So I just want to be clear that you do not need to be doing that in order to gain muscle or have a muscular physique as a female. So let's look at some studies that give us the answer that you're looking for, hopefully, regardless of gender, what needs to happen in order to build muscle. But first, let me know, would you consider what you're doing in the gym currently as heavy lifting? Do you think other people would consider it heavy lifting or just general weight training? Make sure to drop that in the comments below. Now, in full transparency, I had to purchase this article to access more than just the abstract. So if you can find it for free, awesome. Put that in the comments below so that other people can access it as well. So now I want to highlight some main takeaways that I think are vital for your understanding of what it takes to build muscle versus strength. And mind you, this video is about the first, building muscle. So the study reads, a wide spectrum of intensities from 40 to 80% 1RM are viable options to increase muscle mass. It is feasible that employing combinations of these intensities may enhance hypertrophic effects, as well as allow for better recovery by alleviating joint-related stresses from continuous heavy load training. And resistance training with intensity ranging 20 to 80% of 1RM are effective to increase strength and muscle hypertrophy. However, low intensity, aka 20% 1RM, was suboptimal for maximizing muscular hypertrophy. This is what we see in my diagram from pure programming in terms of power versus strength versus hypertrophy versus endurance when it comes to training volume and intensity. The study also states, however, if maximizing strength gains over the long-term training is a primary goal, it is necessary to employ high training intensities. I only note this because often studies are done in untrained individuals with regards to resistance training, which was the case with this particular study. Subjects were healthy, untrained young men. And this type of individual, regardless of gender, will likely see hypertrophic effects along a very large spectrum of training volume and intensities. But as your training age increases, you will have to use heavier weights, aka higher training intensities, to get the same results. Which brings us to the next study, which of course is conducted on men. But in terms of muscular adaptations, I do believe the concepts still apply to female counterparts. This study is extremely dense and quite frankly has its shit together in terms of what they tested and how they tested. This study also took into consideration the dietary intake of these subjects, which is commonly left out in studies in resistance training. They kept a food diary, they didn't change anything, but the information was taken into consideration. The subjects were resistance trained young men, which I absolutely love. And what they found was interesting from comparing upper body to lower body adaptations. So they had a low volume, high intensity group training at 3 to 5 reps with higher loads and long rest periods. You could consider this true strength training if looking at my lovely diagram from peer programming. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they had a high volume, low intensity group, so 10 to 12 reps, under 70% with short rest periods. Both groups tested and trained bench press and squat. Remember that these are trained individuals. That's going to be very important for the context of the study. The findings of this study found no significant differences in lower body hypertrophy or strength, though both groups had significant gains in both muscle size and strength, thus suggesting that size and strength can be gained from both high intensity and high volume or low volume training for squats. Now, I say that with a large grain of salt because I'm wondering how trained these individuals were with any significant lower body training, which could skew the results. That's just speculation. But significant differences in upper body strength and hypertrophy were found. So 93% of high intensity, meaning load, and low volume experienced an increase in lean mass in their upper body, and only 64% of the low intensity group did. This does suggest that training at higher loads with potentially lower volume may be more beneficial for muscle growth in trained young men, and let's infer young women. I know that my body personally adapts best in a hypertrophic state to lower volume, high load training for both upper body and lower body. Maybe that's due to fiber composition or the fact that I do have an older training age. I can't be sure. I just know that after a decade of lifting weights, that's what I adapt best to in terms of hypertrophy. In order to select those higher loads, you might want to check out my video on knowing how much weight to use. But the gist of this is, like I said earlier, the loads need to be challenging, meaning that maybe you have 2-ish reps left in the tank, but it would be a struggle to complete those reps. You'll hear me refer to this as the rule of 2 in my video that I just mentioned. The fact is, we build muscle as a response to stimulus and demand for more muscle tissue. So when you lift weights or do resistance training, you're calling upon your muscle fibers to contract repeatedly, and the goal with hypertrophy is to recruit as many of those muscle fibers within a given muscle as you can. That's why we train muscles via different exercises from different angles and different loads. If the muscle is not provided enough stimulus to demand new muscle fiber growth, then we don't see hypertrophy. And to be clear, you don't grow more muscle fibers. Your individual muscle fibers that you have increase their size based on the demand. That's what's happening when you see a muscle grow. Are there more ways to build muscle than lifting heavy weights? Absolutely yes. I would argue heavily if you have a young training age that does apply to you. But no matter what, stimulus is needed from some kind of resistance training. I believe that lifting weights, particularly maybe heavy weights, is simply the quickest and most efficient way to get there and to shape or form the body that you might want. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you did find this video helpful. I will see you guys in the next one.